Thank you to everyone who found their way down to the conference room C, which is not easy to do. Can you hear me? Do I need this? We are here to talk about mentorship. Some of you have had the mentorship experience, and actually, for whatever reason, probably because both co-organizers of this panel are both on the board, we got the small room. So we're going to shuffle our mentorship pairs halfway through. There'll be like a little halftime dance, and we're going to switch the rooms. But we do have 4 pairs of mentors here to share with everybody experiences, good, bad, and indifferent, and ugly, and whatever. The point of all of this is to be transparent about the process. It's also to inspire you to become mentors, mentees, or peer-to-peer, we don't know what the last word is, peer, mentor, peer, yeah. So obviously someone was in the wrong room. And I have nothing else to do for this session except timing. And I'm going to introduce to you one of my favorite people on the board, and someone who you will see a lot more of if you're an MCN fanatic like me. It's Elizabeth Bollwerk, who's here to my left. And she's not only a fantastic co-presenter, co-collaborator, board buddy, but she's going to be your VP any second now of the MCN. So she has a lot to do. And then eventually she'll be your president. So you were here in the beginning. You will know the president intimately. Here you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Deb. And I have to echo that too. Deb has been an amazing partner in this on the board and in developing this mentorship program. So thank you so much for all your work to make this happen. So welcome, everyone. Just to give you a sense of what we're going to talk about today, I'll give you a little roadmap. So first, I'll give a really brief overview. It won't be long because we want to spend the most of our time talking with our participants about why we developed the program, what we're hoping people will get out of it, and then some of the requirements for applying for 2018, which we'll talk about shortly. And then you'll hear testimonials from our 2017 mentorship participants. We have 4 pairs, as Deb mentioned, who are going to be talking about their experiences. And then finally, we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for live questions and answers. And then one of our mentees, Andrea, will also be watching Twitter. If people would prefer to ask questions that way, you can do so using the hashtag for our session, which is MCN 2017-W2 or MCN hashtag MCN mentorship. So why did MCN start a mentorship program? First and foremost is because we heard from our community that people wanted mentorship. We had a number of panels over the last couple of years at different MCNs, as well as a mentorship pilot program by the Muse Women in 2015 that really demonstrated to us that community members wanted the opportunity to do mentorship and would really benefit from it. So during our conversations last year at MCN 2016, we had a lot of informal discussions about how people wanted to see that happen, make that happen. And so we decided this year we would put together a formal mentorship program to answer that community need. So we really appreciate that our community is talking to us about the professional development programs they need and want. So when we were thinking about what this could do for our community, our main goals was to make sure, one, that it would extend conference opportunities. So one of the things MCN is looking to do now is to expand beyond the conference. We're hoping to become a year-round active organization, and we're really pleased that, this is our first program that's year-round, and we're really excited that it's off the ground and seems to be working well. And we're hoping that we'll be able to establish more professional development opportunities in the coming years that will also be year-round, working outside of the conference. And then in a lot of informal conversations that we've had with some of the people who are in senior leadership that are part of the MCN community and also emerging and mid-career professionals, there's this real sense of this need for transfer of knowledge. So if we want to see more people, more Muse Tech people especially stepping into these leadership roles, we need to be transferring the knowledge from the people who are already there and who know how to get there to some of the more junior members of our community. So that's another really important goal that we have as part of this program. And finally, we just want to give people a chance to network outside of the conference. So this is a chance for people to be paired together, to get to know each other, and to create, new connections in their professional webs. So that was kind of what we were aiming for with the program. And just in terms of thinking kind of about this audience and the individuals in it, what we're hoping mentorship could mean for you, again, that transfer of knowledge and experience from more senior leadership. but also increasing your career currency. So one of the things we talked with in our orientation with our participants was thinking about both the hard and soft skills they wanted to gain and improve through the program. So not only hard skills of, certain learning how to use certain programs or software, but also soft skills like how do I manage a boss who maybe isn't so interested in digital or social media, or how do I manage this difficult relationship at work. So thinking about both of those things when they were developing, for the mentees, developing their goals for over the 10 months of meeting with their mentors. So that's something that individuals in this room who are interested can also keep in mind if you're thinking forward towards next year's application. And then gaining new perspectives. I think we're hoping one of the really valuable things that comes out is by interacting with a mentor or mentee, or we also have a peer-to-peer model that is non-hierarchical, but if you want somebody who's more of your peer in terms of where you are in your career, is thinking about interacting with them and learning how from their experiences, how you can interact with other people in your social and professional network. So kind of building empathy for people in different situations, getting to understand what different people are going through to help you manage maybe difficult points in your career or difficult relationships. So really helping drive that idea of gaining new perspectives and being open to interacting with new types of people through your mentorship. And then finally, peer support. As I mentioned, we have that peer-to-peer option that was part of the 2017, which Susan will talk about, and Scott, and we will have it in 2018 as well. So we're hoping that will be a useful way for people to maybe extend their peer network if you're an emerging or mid-career professional just looking to meet new people who are at your level in other institutions. And then just quickly to give you a brief overview of what the requirements were. So first and foremost, active membership in MCN. We felt it was important that our pilot program and that now moving forward, our next year's program be a membership benefit. And so all of the participants are active members in MCN. There's an online application, and you can see the link to the 2018 application at the bottom here that everyone filled out. And for us, that was primarily to gather information so that we could create good pairs. So for mentees, it was telling us, well, what can you contribute? What kinds of things are you looking to learn from a mentor? What areas do you feel you really need help or guidance in? For the mentors, it was telling us what do they feel confident and comfortable talking about, what advice do they feel comfortable giving. So with those two pieces of information, we could fit people together and figure out good pairings for where people were in their careers and the types of content and topics they were interested in learning and teaching about. And in terms of the time commitment, we did one live online orientation training at the beginning for everybody, all of the participants, where we kind of laid out the expectations for the program, the idea it was going to run 9 months or 10 months, and that every pair was expected to meet every month at least once, and probably for an hour to 3 hours, however long they wanted to spend time together, and also encouraging the mentees to create a list of goals and things that they wanted to get out of the year and be able to use that as a roadmap and check back to it with their mentors periodically to make sure they were actually reaching those goals they'd set at the beginning and covering the topics that they wanted to cover. And in terms of how Deb and I have kept in touch with the participants, we did a few online surveys throughout the process of the program to make sure people were actually meeting with each other, having productive conversations, and seeing if people wanted any more structure, because we were once we did the pairing, fairly hands-off in terms of providing direct support or check-ins other than the surveys. So we would answer individual emails, but not necessarily talking to the group, as it were. So that was kind of our way of continuing to facilitate in addition to this panel. So now you've heard enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to our first mentor-mentee pair, Darren Milligan and Laura Hoffman, who will be talking about keeping on track.
Should we just use do you want to hold that? Anyway, so hi, everybody. So I think each of us have sort of a different sort of focus to talk about. And I think as Laura and I were talking about how we sort of kept on track, and we should probably say, I think at the beginning, we were the only pair that was in the same. Can you hear? Can you guys hear okay in the back? Okay. We were the only pair that was in the same place? Or?
No, there's another.
Okay. So I think part of our experience is a little different than probably the typical MCN mentorship experience. And I think we were sort of planning on talking a little bit more about sort of what that meant, but I think the realities of this program are that's not realistic. So I think we tried to kind of extrapolate out of what our experience was to try to kind of think around this topic. So I think we thought about 3 moments, right, in our sort of relationship that we thought were probably valuable in terms of, you know, those goals that I think we both had at the beginning when we were applying, how we ensured that we sort of maintain those, right? And the first one was during the application process. Do you want to sort of talk about that? Yeah, go for that.
Did you turn it off? No. Yeah. Hello.
That's kind of nice,
yeah.
right?
We're talk show
Yeah.
style. So for me being mid-career and entering into mid-career, I was really unsure at the beginning about whether I wanted to be a mentee or a mentor. And I just thought about as I was filling out the application that I really wanted to have someone who's already been through the mid-career part and could help navigate. So my focus in picking to be a mentee was really focusing on wanting to talk about someone, that idea of mid-career, as well as being in this space of both I'm an educator and museum technologist, and how I feel often pulled between the two, even though I see them as quite combined. So those were my 2 focuses.
Yeah, and I think that reflects on the advice, which is I think you did a lot of time really thinking specifically about what you wanted out of this. It wasn't that, yeah, I know I'm at a point in my career that I probably could benefit from a mentor. It was really about, you know, what specifically do I need help with, or what specifically could I, you know, benefit from an alternate perspective of, right?
Yeah.
And I think from the same thing too, I kind of, as the place that you've described where I am too, the ability to have a perspective on sort of other members of my own team and where they sort of are. And so I think, you know, being very intentional about your application and how you think about what you hope to get out of this experience. And I think also being realistic about your ability to kind of have another relationship in your life. You know, are you at a place professionally, personally, where you're ready to take on this relationship? Because I think it's really if it's going to work, it's a new relationship. It's probably a different type of relationship that you may have, and it may blossom into, I think, partially because we were in the same place. I think Laura and I become sort of more confidant friends than sort of more of a structured kind of mentorship, because, you know, we were able to like go have a beer, which a lot of the groups were not able to do because they were sort of separate. So.
Which I highly recommend. No.
Yeah, right? So I think the second stage, right, in that sort of process of keeping on track was that first meeting. And I think we sat down immediately and said, this is what I want. And I think that is great advice. And I think it was probably advice that came from
the orientation. And I remember in the orientation they said, you know, you as mentees have to drive some of this because mentors, you know, don't want to feel responsible on taking over those. So that was really helpful for me to know, okay, as a mentee, I need to really think about what my goals are for this, as well as knowing that I'm going to be reaching out and doing all the scheduling for the 2 of us. So taking that ownership, so it's not just like, mentor, guide me in every way possible. It's like this is an exchange between the 2 of us.
Very much, yeah. And I think, again, it's very about being intentional. It's really, you know, I think the first 2 minutes we were like, this is what we want this to be. And not just, this is the kind of thing I might need advice on. It's more like, how do we want to interact? Should this be casual? Should this be structured? Do we want to have an agenda each time? Or is it really a scheduled meeting? Or is it, can I call you on the phone if I have a question? You know, to be really, really upfront and specific about that, I think was really valuable and helping us just immediately sort of trust each other and make sure we're on the same page, right?
I remember when I was walking over, I was like talking to my mom, and I was like, this kind of feels like a first date, because you're like, I don't know if we're going to be on the same page. I have to ask like what he wants out of this new relationship.
Right.
And then after I was like, I think it went really well.
Really well. I think that was successful. Yeah. No, it was... Yeah, totally. And I think, you know, and I think that actually goes back to the first point of being really clear about what you want out of this, and letting the coordinators know that, I think really helps them ensure that the type of success I think we found is possible, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the third moment, which is something that we didn't really do, and I think we probably should have, was having, right from the beginning, having that sort of midpoint expectation that, okay, 5 months from now, we're going to have the same conversation again. We're going to sort of say, 5 months ago we decided this is how things were going to go. Let's make sure we do that again. And really taking that sort of, it's kind of like a performance plan at work. Like it's that designated time to talk about is how this is working and sort of what the expectations are. Are the expectations the same, right?
Yeah, and I remember while we didn't do that formally, I think we both filled out the survey, the mid one that you guys had sent out. And I'm sure if you guys had seen any red flags, you probably would have stepped in. Because I was like, oh, I'm having the best time.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So ours did.
Some others can say that can attest to us stepping in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, ours, I think just at that point we had gotten into the groove, but I do think at the end, we were talking about it here at MCN, how we could have had it be a little more structured and just to really make sure, but I definitely felt like we had wanted it to feel for us. I think at the very beginning we both talked about how we wanted a really authentic relationship where we were growing our network, so it was a little bit more soft skills than hard skills, and I was really interested in talking about leadership, which Darren has so much experience with, so it just kind of naturally grew. And also a really nice thing with us is because we were in the same city, one time Darren came to me and I was able to show him all of the projects I'd been working on. Another time I went to your work, and then other times we'd meet in completely neutral places where we knew no one could overhear us. And so it was nice. It just, we were able to naturally grow into a really good relationship.
I'm gonna insert myself just for a second as timekeeper and say, that it's really difficult to map people into the same city. We try when possible, and that's another reason why we want as many people to apply for either position or all positions, as many as possible, because that could be a really wonderful thing to be in the same city. But most of the mentorships were virtual mentorships, just to say. And now we're going to pass on to another pair, although you guys stay right there. And please, Sean and Brendan, take it away.
Hey, I'm Brendan Sieco, founder and CEO of QZM.
I'm Sean Blinn, and I hope you can hear me. I actually came to the museum field as a career changer. I'd been in the telecoms industry and fell in love with museums and started thinking I should do this, and so now I'm doing this. And
and to jump into mentorship, I want to start straight from the heart. We're a family here. I'm a product of mentorship programs. I have no college education. My mom drives a school bus and my dad is a plumber. And truly what I've been able to achieve has been through access to mentors and programs. And so I feel that it is my duty in any space that I work in. I have mentors and advisors, and I saw it as, comparing the nonprofit sector and the museum sector to other spaces that I intersect. Was so excited to see MCN kind of taking this initiative for professional development to kind of cultivate the next generation of museum leaders. And so when that came up, I'm like, oh my God, I have to do this. If there's anybody who needs anything, what can I do to help? And to kind of segue into what we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at two different approaches to mentorship. We took a more professional development approach as compared to a more moral support, and we're going to kind of dissect the pros and the cons of both.
And the interesting thing is that maybe it was part of the application, or maybe it was just how we both approached this, that we really did have that understanding from really early on that this was here for professional development, and I think it worked really well. But again, I think it's one of the understandings. Jump off that. You need to know this going into it.
Yeah. So from the very get-go, kind of the first moments that we had, kind of learning about each other and where we could kind of see eye to eye, really wanted to understand what you were looking for professionally, and you seemed like you were at this pivotal point in your career where you could either go into the museum field as an employee or as a contractor or build a business, or you had a lot of different ideas, none of which had been kind of cemented down. And so we kind of, I left you with homework essentially after every call to really understand. You have to set your 5-year goal. You have to be able to look at what milestones, where you want to be, how you want to feel, what you want to be kind of spending your day doing. And so you would come back.
And then what would happen, and I would do my homework, and it's like, okay, I've been in grad school 2 or 3 times, the idea of homework is, old hat to me. But it's but really it's the kind of thing where when you come into this with, and this is one of the things that we've been talking about ever since we talked about this panel, is, well, what are the pros and cons of coming into this either as that professional development versus that kind of nurturing relationship. And one of the things that really seemed to be essential in the professional development is the pros are you are getting homework, you are getting guidance. And if you are trying to figure out your career, then it's good to get some guidance, and it's good to get some, well, if you do, pros and cons of this. And some of the cons that we were kicking around were that, it is, you're in a sense reporting to somebody if you really approach this as a full professional development. And Brendan, I remember, I guess it was when you were 13, you founded your first company or something.
Yeah. So I've been my whole life has existed around kind of setting long-term goals and then setting short-term kind of micro progressions to be able to get to those goals. And so one of the things that had been really kind of ingrained in me from a young age was to be pushed outside my comfort zone and to find people who would push me outside my comfort zone. And that's probably one of the differences you could point to between the moral support, where you have your cheerleader, your champion, someone you can open up to but not feel intimidated to go so deep where you feel vulnerable, but truly to succeed in a more professional development perspective, you have to kind of stand naked in some degree, and not literally, did not happen. But
this was
guys, we did Google Hangout, but none of that happened. But to be vulnerable about what your fears are if you take that a specific track, and so being able to establish that from a very early standpoint, and I think it speaks to the effectiveness of the matchmaking, where it seemed like you were kind of this in between all of these different areas, and I wear a lot of hats, and so there was some kind of good synergies off of that.
Oh, absolutely. I thought the match was really top notch. I mean, I've got to give guys credit for somehow coming up with a good match with this. It was from an online process where at that point where we were all playing, none of us had met each other. And it's like, okay, well, it's just going to work. And it just kind of did. But it was really good to get that guidance and that feedback from somebody. Who's like, okay, now if you're going to go down this route, here's some of the steps. And there were questions that I didn't know I had, and Brendan was able to provide me with some guidance and say, if you're thinking about this, you should be thinking about, if you're thinking about A, you've got to think about A1, A2, A3, A4. And so I thought that was part of that professional development angle, which is like, okay, here's what you got to do to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, and
I just think since we have this halftime arrangement, maybe we should open up for questions.
Sure, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just kind of, does anyone want to lob a question or two over to these mentors? Does anything inspire something you want to know more about?
Question. How do you know whenever you're ready for a mentor?
You mean ready to be a mentor as opposed to a
ready
mentee?
to be mentored?
Okay, so both. So one of each. How
Well,
do you know you're ready?
I was ready because I knew I was at the point that Brendan had said, it's like, okay, I've got a couple of different options, and it's time, to pick one. You kind of, okay, now's the point where you have to pick what you want to be when you grow up. And also professionally, I know we've talked about this as the professional versus moral support angle. I felt it's like, okay, I'm comfortable enough with myself. I'm comfortable enough with I have enough self-confidence that I'm willing to say, okay, I'm willing to hear if there's any tough news. There wasn't, but if there's anything that I need to hear, that's one of the things. If you are at that point, then that's a big hurdle. So if you're at that point where you're ready to hear the advice, then.
And Laura, do you have some? Sure. Yes. For me, being at MCN a couple of years, I had Darren and I had met. But we would see each other like once a year and maybe catch up over 5 minutes. So I really wanted to be able to connect with someone that I'd been seeing at MCN and have a deeper relationship. So I just knew that I had a lot of questions that, I know Susan, you'll speak later. We're peer to peers, so I have really great peer to peers, but I just hadn't gotten to the next level with some of these people that I'd seen at MCN conferences, and I wanted a more year-long mentorship program. So I just was ready to ask and have started a new relationship that I knew would be hard for me personally to. I'm not the type of person to just cold call someone and say like, "Hey, Darren, I've always admired your work," out of the blue, not at an MCN conference. So this really opened up a chance for me to have it and work on it, and it be like a safe space to grow together.
Mentors?
Can I just ask one follow-up for that? Now that you've been in this relationship, would you be more inclined to call someone that you weren't formally set up with because you've done this now? If you admired someone's work, would you call them and ask for it?
I think everyone should. I think it's like a personal comfort level. I think beer helps.
Yeah, and I think, Liz, I think, we know this community very well, and I think most people who are at this conference would welcome that.
Yeah.
But I think, to Laura's point, that they're having this structure helps some folks who are probably newer in to be able to sort of do that. Because don't you agree? I think most people in this room, if they got a random email from someone who said, "Hey, I like your work, can I talk to you about it?" Who doesn't want to talk about their work?
And like Darren and I personally talked about how we want to continue in a more informal way our mentorship relationship. It'll change a bit because he's not obligated, I'm not obligated, but we want to continue it. So I think now it's going to kind of settle into that really natural friendship, but at still getting that information. So I think now I feel more comfortable, and I know I would be more comfortable talking about Darren. He has a different network, so if there was other people, I could use him as a resource to help talk to other people.
And
Brendan, do you want to respond, and then we'll switch?
Yeah, there are a couple parts of it, and I want to underscore. I've been a part of mentor programs like TechStars. I've mentored at Harvard's Innovation Lab, and I've been on all sides of the table over the last couple of years. And what's been beautiful to see is there's no kind of hard and fast rule or hierarchy. There are a lot of these little tiers where literally some part of it is paying it forward. If you see someone in the community that you think you could help, and you're only a couple years, 2 years ago you were them, why not reach out and, put your hand out forward to give them some of that advice that maybe you received or something that you've learned as a means of kind of bringing everybody up together. So I think that's one of the great things, and you usually know when you kind of get excited to the fact when you're talking to someone, you're like, oh my God, I was you 2 years ago and I want to help you. And I think that's when you know.
Yeah, and I think some of the
Sorry, I'm going
we're cut off. Sounds good.
Because I kind of felt that was
So do the dance. If you have any questions for me as like program manager, shoot them to me now. But otherwise, yes. Pairing. Yes. No, you know what? It's really more serendipity than anything else in terms of the geography. It just so happened we got a lot of applications from people in DC. So there were 4 who we were able to pair together. But I have probably at least 1, if not 2 other DC mentor or mentees who are not paired with someone in DC.
But are they in the same museum or
No, we wouldn't do that, actually. I think we wouldn't share anyone in the same museum. In fact, if there are people, like sometimes we aren't sure that they actually know each other already, and so we did a little like clearance on that too. Yeah. Sure. I mean, you can request anything you want in your, when you fill out the form. There's a lot of opportunities to tell us about yourself. I'll just say that you might put so much information that we can't make a pair. So think about that.
You want to be kind of as broad as possible, but not maybe too many things that you don't want. Yeah.
Like one of the one person said to us who was a mentor, I really wished I'd known to say in the form that as a mentor I really wanted someone with like a mid-level experience, and she got paired with someone who had a very entry-level experience, and of course neither one had made any specification about that. But I encourage you to do so. To me, maybe but it didn't really matter. But some people, they really feel like they need someone at a certain level, then say that in your application. Because it is a different skill set. And also, you know, the way that, I mean, I've been in the field too many decades, but when I start, you know, my experience as a 20-year-old in the museum field is very different from today's experience. So my experience may not even be that relevant, so to speak. All right. Oh, look, they've assembled. Fantastic. Okay. We need to change the slides. Go. Camera on.
Hello. So I am Erin Harper. I work at the Holocaust Museum as a multimedia producer. I was in journalism for 10 years, so just switched over to Museum World in 2015. And so when I saw that this program was coming about, I was really excited because I felt that I did not yet know enough people in the museum industry. I didn't have a network or friends or, you know, all the background that I would love to have to get started. So I definitely signed up. I had a couple of reservations. One of them was time commitment, and I was concerned, like, you know, what am I taking on? And also the amount of work and responsibility, sort of the output, like was there going to be homework or not? So, but I think, so I met Liz. This is Liz Neely. And go ahead, tell us.
We're obviously Twinkies because we're the ones with our notes and our slides, and we've got command center here. Which it was a very, very good pair. We both got New Mexico on our. So I got involved because I've been involved with MCN for a long time. This is a passion I have, and I just believe that I just really believe in the networking aspects of what we're doing at MCN, and this is something that can go on for years. So I think we got together, and just to tell the story of us a little bit, we got together again, as was mentioned before, just to kind of level set and decide what we wanted, and we had and it just. What I love about this is being someone that's been in the field also decades. So I've been around, but I really love as it turns out, I'm obsessed right now with how journalism is affecting museums and journalism's in museums. So then they pair me. I didn't put that in the application. They put me with her, and so the first meeting is like she's learning about museums. I'm saying, what about this journalism thing? Let's talk about journalism. So I think that there's always that the great part about. I mean, I thought a lot when you all were talking, because I like to think about it all as peer to peer, but I guess it is a little different because I have been in the field for a long time, so it is a different thing, but it's not. We're both learning from each other. So I guess we have in our notes the peer-to-peer vibe. So I guess it's not necessarily that we're peer-to-peers because we're doing the same thing, we're in the field, but we kind of brought that to the table, that I have a lot to learn from Erin, and super interesting stuff, and she has things to learn from me as far as like what is the navigating of the world. So we both live in DC, and so that did play aspects to it, just like it did for you. But I think that we also want to say that I think that it doesn't necessarily that way. We ended up with a more social kind of way, and we'll kind of dive a little more into that. But that can also be beer came up a lot. Not that it didn't come up with. I mean, in the talk before. Yeah, it's not necessary. But I was just telling, when we were analyzing how this would have been different if we were not in the same city. I was telling a story of Scott, Sarah, and I from back, and that we could get together over Skype, or my current boss, Rob, when he lived in a different place, we would get on Skype and have a drink, or just get together and have social time there too. So. I'm going to hand it over to you to talk now.
No, it's a funny point about how we have Google Docs going right now, because I was making the joke this morning. This is actually our first one. So I started out with several, and before I met Liz, I was like, okay, what do I want to do in 5 years? I was like kind of putting myself through a little bit of stress about it, and then we met, and I was like, oh, we just click. We don't really need a Google Doc, and that's okay with us on both sides of it. So it's funny to end up here. But I definitely agree that we took a very social route. I liked to look look at this as more like it wasn't about where we worked or exactly our role, but I felt like I had a museum buddy for life. Like we could go to a museum together. And one, yeah, one of the funny things too that you said a couple weeks ago when we were preparing for this panel was she's like, "Oh, I didn't realize it was over," like because it's nine months. I guess I was thinking, okay, well maybe it's a year, and then after a while, like we got set to be friends also, and it felt like, well, in 5 years, I'm still going to see you at MCN, and we're still going to talk about this kind of thing and go out to dinner. So for me, having a friend to talk about even bigger picture things, like the idea of self-reflecting in terms of like what you want for your career, I think that's best done when you share it with someone, because then you have someone who heard you and can later hold up the mirror and say, I'm going to hold you accountable. Do you remember when you said you wanted to work on this? And I think that we have more of a relationship that's like that about developing a relationship, which is how we got to this section. This is our theme, definitely building relationship.
I just want, so we quickly, our recommendations, this came up before, open and transparent from the outset. If she would have wanted something structured, we would have needed to work that out. But we both agreed that we were okay with it being more about social, less structured and that kind of thing. But we still did check-ins and made sure we are okay. We wanted to make sure that we decided what we wanted to be, how often we could do it. I think we both wish we would have. I wish we would have done it more often, but time is definitely an issue sometimes. And just really thinking about like in the future that we want to continue like going more to museums together. I love that you went to each space, so we've got to put that on the list. So and the last, so just the transparency and talking things through. And if you're not liking something, just talk through it, and you can probably change that. And then I think we just wanted to, I don't know where we are in time, but we want to say thank you so much to Deb, Beth, anyone else that was involved, because I think it's just so important. And I know that I do have a museum buddy for life, and you did a great job pairing people. You did a really great job.
Thank you.
Well, and that's a good segue to Scott and Susan, because it was Scott's fault that I got this job.
Yeah, it's my fault.
Anyway, go ahead,
start,
you
Susan.
guys. I'm
Sure.
gonna advance the slide for you.
So we've heard from 3 really specific mentor-mentee pairs, and Scott and I are sort of the outliers there because we actually weren't paired together initially. So unlike Laura and Aaron and Sean, who I think kind of knew what they wanted out of this program, I think I was in a little bit of a like post-MCN, like, yes, I'll get involved in anything haze. And
We love that haze. That's the haze. You go to the website and fill out that form.
And so when
Purple
I
haze.
filled out the form last year, I was sort of like, well, I could mentor someone who's in grad school, kind of thinking about their career. I'm about 5-6 years into mine, but maybe I'd like to have a mentor, but like that's a lot to ask of someone. Like I don't know how comfortable I am with doing that. Like I'll just see where this ends up. And turns out that the other person who had done that was Desi Gonzalez from the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. And I think Beth and Deb were sort of like, what do we do with like these 2 weirdos who don't know what they want?
Weirdo did not.
That's my word.
I wanted to be a mentor and a mentee.
Well,
I thought, perfect.
Well, but I think for me, I was really willing to be on either side of that coin. And so peer mentorship was a little bit different, and Desi and I had met each other before, and we were willing to just sort of give it a chance and see what happened. And I think that we found that we both do have peers, colleagues, friends who are in the industry, but that having a little bit more structure and place to talk to each other about what was going on in our work and what we might want out of our careers was very useful. And then sometimes we would vent about things. We did some goal setting mutually, which I think was great. Definitely a little bit more on the like moral support friendly side of things than really structured professional development, just because of where we were each coming from. But we did hit a point where we were sort of like, we don't know where to go from here because our experiences are so similar and we're in such similar places in our career. So we reached out to Beth and Deb to say that and asked, is there someone you could connect us to? And that's how we got connected to Scott.
So we were trying to figure out how we're going to put this together, since we got connected really late in the game.
Like June, July.
Yeah. So I'm the example. I'm the fail fast example. I had a mentee, person X, who I was paired with, and person X kept putting off our initial meeting, and which was an early indicator that maybe it wasn't going to work out very well. Eventually, person X and I got on the phone together, and we had a nice conversation, and person X explained to me that when we talked about what each other wanted to get out of, I was in the mentor role, person X was in the mentee role. She explained to me that she wanted to build a MOOC and wanted me to help her build a MOOC. And I'm not even a big fan of MOOCs, so this was immediately kind of a disconnect. And it also wasn't what I really thought that I had signed up for, and I didn't feel like I was the best person to help her with this. And so I took a minute and thought about, how do I just not shut this thing down right away? Because my initial reaction was what I just said, but I didn't say that out loud. And so I said, why do you want to build a MOOC? What are you trying to accomplish? And so we started to kind of take that question apart. And it was really that she had read about it and was excited about it. And I, asked her we started to talk about it and break down what problem she was really trying to solve. And she was very engaged, at least I got that impression. And we agreed that I was going to send her some kind of homework questions to go do a little bit of research on her audience that she was trying to address, to make sure that the MOOC was the best approach, and look at what other things were already out there in the community she was trying to serve with this MOOC, to make sure that the investment in actually developing this would actually be useful. And I never heard from her again. So, and I reached out to her many, many, many times, and she just disappeared. So I don't think what she signed up for and what she thought she was going to get was what she was going to get, and the process that I was offering her wasn't really compatible. But at the same time, I think it really is a good example of someone having and potentially anticipating something very specific, and I don't think having, excuse me, an expectation of getting something very specific out of these types of mentorships is the best way of using them. I'm a huge believer in this. I believe that, lifelong mentee. I don't think that just because you're a senior person means, in fact, this person that I was working with was probably senior to me, but had chosen to be a mentee. But I do believe that, like I was joking with Susan, that my mentees now are people that actually aren't in the museum field, but I feel are professionals that still, that I can aspire to specific aspects of or specific strengths they have that I think would really benefit the museum field, and I feel like it's not really even being a senior person that it's about being a mentee, that many people at my level can still use. Can always be menteed further along. So circling back and with closure to this, so Desi and Susan reached out to me, and we had a really nice discussion about where they are in their careers and what they're trying to achieve. And it was a nice. I give a lot of credit to Beth and Deb for putting us together, because we both had kind of stalled in our relationships, and it gave us an opportunity to. Susan and I have talked a couple of times, and I think we'll probably continue to, about what she's trying to work on in her career, and I think we had some really nice discussions. But it was really, I give it to you guys for being agile in your process and kind of working with what we had and patching together something that I think turned out to be pretty fruitful for all of us.
And I think that idea of sort of asking for help and making what you're looking for clear is really right on both sides, because if Desi and I hadn't reached out to say like, hey, we need some help here, we certainly would not have been connected to Scott, and I think we might have just sort of petered out a little bit. And then Scott and I had a really interesting conversation about how the person that you might be paired with maybe initially might not be someone that you've met before or all that interested in getting to know. You might just not have any idea, and the relationship you have with someone is so kind of specific to the two of you, and being able to kind of follow that path together and both being willing to have some flexibility there, I think was really key through both my peer mentoring relationship and the conversation that we were able to have with Scott. If I had had a conversation with someone else, I'm sure we would have gotten something different out of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that one thing is better or worse. I think this networking, growing, broader piece of it is really critical, and that openness will help facilitate better relationships.
Really good point. Should we move to questions?
Sure.
Okay. So floor is open for questions. I have a slide for that. There. Go ahead.
So I think in our workplaces, we all have challenges that are both universal, but also really specific to like the politics of the office or the bureaucracy of whatever we work with. So when you're describing what's going on in your work that week or that month, how do you sort of cut to the chase? How do you sort of figure out what is sort of unique to you and what is something that's more universal? How do you sort of build up that not knowing the politics of your own office or of what you're each dealing with?
I mean, I kind of feel like the crux of the relationships are more about where we are and your like personal professional development. So even though I know we talked about things that were happening, but it wasn't like solving specific problems. It's more about like, this is where I am, this is what I'm trying to do next. So it's like when you come to MCN, I think we're thinking more broadly. It's not about that's the beauty of getting out of the office sometimes, is that you're talking about the stuff that we're doing, not about how it manifests itself in the office. I mean, I think, dealing with, I'm sure that there are plenty of pairs that talked about dealing with a manager that doesn't recognize you. We did not talk about that. We talked about actually, you have a really great pair with your leader, and so do I. And so I'm sure things like that come up, but I think it's more on a person-person rather than bigger politics. It's more about like, what is my relationship with this person who is affecting the way my career can grow and things like that. So, and I think that's pretty universal. Was that everyone else's experience?
We did talk about confidentiality in the orientation, which I think is just a good reminder there. So not, even if you're naming names of people in your workplace, that shouldn't be leaving your mentoring relationship. But I think sometimes having a different but parallel experience can sometimes be more useful than talking to someone who's having the exact same kind of problem, because they might be able to give you insight into how they've solved something similar. I know Desi and I shared some resources that have helped both of us in our work. And so even on a peer-to-peer level, we've been able to sort of push past some particular things, or at least like get a little bit more insight into how we might try something else if something in our workplace just wasn't working for whatever reason.
Any other questions? Yes.
This is more for you two.
Okay.
So you had one relationship that kind of fell apart. I'm curious if you had others and what you think the pairs could have done differently in their applications or in their information to you.
Right.
That
I
would
think
have kind of prevented that.
you've actually heard about the two. So like Scott told you, and I have to say the person who expressed that they would have rather had a different level as their mentee, I mean, didn't stop being. I mean, or they just didn't feel like they could give as much to it. Like that it wasn't taking as much advantage of her as a professional as she wanted to give. They weren't ready for the advanced. And so that is more of a lesson back to us. But if you were looking for data, I think we had 40-something applicants to begin with. And the thing is, unlike now where you have to put in your membership number to even submit your form, last year we didn't have that functionality. So we got a lot of people applying who actually weren't members. And so we had to keep them aside until we could get them to pay for their membership. And so some people decided at that point that they didn't want side. So of the actually qualified mentors that we, mentees that we got, I think we paired all but 3. And those 3 were members, but they were looking for a very specific relationship that we just didn't have. And generally speaking, they were mentees looking for certain kinds of mentors. We just didn't have it. So
how many pairs were?
so we have 10 pairs
Okay.
in total. 20 people, 10 pairs.
And I think too, I mean, for us, it's kind of an iterative process. So this year we've built a few more questions into our application to try and tweak what kind of information we're looking for. I think, and I actually don't know if we've added, we might want to add something about emerging versus mid level for the mentors to think about capturing.
Too late, we already have applicants.
That's a good point. Well, we can always move on.
There's only a certain point where you can be really iterative.
Right. But I think too, part of our goal in doing the orientation and then in the survey was to try to catch that as early as we could. Unfortunately, because of the way kind of I think person X put off those meetings, we got to May or June before we really figured out. I can't remember at what point the split happened, but
It was earlier than that.
it was earlier.
Well, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So this year I think we'll try and be more proactive about maybe having one check-in 1 month after to make sure things are going well. And the nice thing was when the time came for Susan and Desi to ask for help, we had Scott, who was already involved in the program, but just hadn't worked out with the pairing. So for us, we're now kind of building this group where if somebody came to us again next year and said, "Oh, I'm looking for this. Do you have any sense? We just need a little help." We're now kind of having this bank of people who we could say, "Oh, well, these people need just 1 meeting or 2 meetings. Can you help them out with this specific aspect?" So we're also trying to build a community of mentorship that we can help, plug some of those holes that may not be working between individual pairs. So that's also part of the network.
Yes, Douglas.
So for you guys, but also for the other mentors, I serve as a mentor too. It's great. I learned a ton from my mentees.
Right.
A suggestion or a question to other mentors. I would have liked to connect with the other mentors at least once or twice during the process to see what they were doing. Now, I just learned things today that would have been great to have known 6 months ago. So I don't know, does that resonate with everyone? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, scheduling challenge is the only thing preventing that. But yeah, totally doable. We could have like a coffee clutch.
Yeah, or we could also do something asynchronous.
Online.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's great. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for because we want to offer more structure, but we don't want to implement it if there isn't desire for it. So knowing that now, next year we can totally schedule something. That's great to know.
Andrea, anything from the Twitter sphere?
We had a question about homework, and I think everyone's mentioned it. But
Yeah.
I got homework from
Yeah.
before.
You know what? I think homework
I
is.
fooled you, I didn't call it homework.
We don't assign any homework, but in the
What was
course,
the homework like?
I mean, maybe you guys can talk about that, what the homework was like, but the concept is that if you're gonna set goals and you're gonna work towards those goals and you're gonna check in with each other, there's stuff that has to be done, whatever
Right.
that is. Go to a museum or look up some article or draft an elevator speech, like whatever it is that you can share at the next meeting and get feedback on. So that's the concept of homework.
Yeah,
but maybe
the
you guys
homework
have-
could just be thinking about something.
Yeah, yeah, it's really open.
Andrea, how many times did you rewrite your resume?
You write them out.
The right amount. Good answer.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
I think Sean and Brendan, you guys mentioned it too. I mean, was it specific assignments or was it more like thinking exercises?
No, there were actual tangibles that I expected to see in the upcoming call. Like if someone says, "Hey, well, I want to do this," it's like, well, here are 3 practical, small things that you can do to even, accomplish part of that goal. So if it's like, I want to have some level of audience or awareness, we should have a blog or a website and start building that audience. So post something introducing yourself to this community and have it due, a month later. So really kind of scaling back to small, tangible, items.
And that worked out well, Sean, because that's what you wanted.
Yeah, it was exactly what I wanted. So instead of like, well, I should be doing something, and then, when I got it wasn't so much homework. Well, depending on how it was homework, But I think that was like, here's 3 things you could do if you wanted to. So it's not like, here's your homework, bring it in, we're going to give you a check mark the next day.
There's
But
too much dog ate my homework, and I'm like, listen,
I
gotta whip you into shape. No, it was all.
But it was all suggestions that were like, if you really want to do this, then these are three steps that you could take to help advance you towards your goal, which was always helpful.
Anything from the table? Darren, do you want to comment on the homework aspect?
Didn't really. I mean, I think ours was a little bit more. I think sort of Scott was sort of getting in more. You know, when we were talking about a certain idea or approach, it'd be like, well, have you thought about this or this? You know, here's some places that you might want to sort of do some research. But it wasn't a. And next time, I want to see evidence that you've done. It was just more of a suggestions for ways to kind of continue thinking about something.
Yeah.
Can I ask if any of the other mentors, like in closing your calls or conversations, did you have here's the action plan, like this is what we talked about and this is what I want you to prepare for the next time? Like some sort of call to action or action plan? Or is it just left like, and cut?
Yeah, I just hung out at the end. Actually, Brennan, my expectation is that Andrew would do that.
Great.
So, and we made that explicit from the very beginning of the relationship, that she was sort of responsible for the structural bits of it. So that then she, at the end of every call, would sum up, here's what we talked about, here's what we're doing next, and here's what each of us have committed to.
There was a Google Doc. Short answer.
I wonder if there should. I've kind of two potential suggestions looking forward as the potential of this program, which I think is huge. One is maybe it shouldn't be so binary where you're a mentor or you're a mentee, but it should be more of a sliding scale of how much you want of both. Because I think that's really what it comes down to, is if you think, well, my job is just dispenser of wisdom, a lot of people aren't going to be up for that. And it also just kind of gives you, I think it gives a more realistic perspective on what a good relationship should be, where it's not so binary. My other thought is, I feel like with the peer-to-peer, there's really interesting possibilities for parallel research projects taking place where the peer-to-peer could be more topical, where there's 2 people that are working on some type of analytics or something like that in 2 parallel places, and they're actually sharing. It's more specific than just a general peer-to-peer relationship, but it has a particular project that people will be working on in parallel and can be, really bring something valuable back to present here that's beyond just a professional development relationship.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, my offer to all of you who are all going to enroll and is that in one of the write-in areas, you should say, if there's an opportunity to connect with other people who are working on this particular subject, and then fill in that subject. I would be open to a peer group on that. And basically, it sounds like, because there's an online form, it sounds like there's some magic box at the end of the other side of the Google form that automatically pairs you. Actually, humans read your applications, and humans talk about oh, do you know this person? Like, how big is that museum? Is that going to be? Is this experience going to match with that? Sort of thing. Like, there's a lot of paper and pencil and brain work that goes behind making the pairs. And so, if I get a piece of information, or one of us who are working on the applications, if we get that piece of information, it actually can spark some ideas to make things happen. And then I would say half of the pairs I actually had, or Beth did, a communication with them and say, did you mean this when you said that? Or, are you open to this? And so it's not like you're never going to hear from us until you get your mail order bride. It's not necessarily the way it goes. Anyway, that's probably a bad analogy.
And friendly space policy.
Yeah.
I think you need a chat bot.
I do.
Take care of all of
Yeah.
that.
Put it in. Speaking of bot.
Deb, do you need us to recruit
Yes,
people?
please go forth and prosper. Because I think the mentorship, even though that just means more applications for us to read, I think the more people we have, I think the better the matches can be. So even if this doesn't sound like your thing this year, please do talk to people about we especially need female mentors. We get a lot of men mentors, but we didn't this year get as many female mentors. So I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Any last questions or comments? Because we're right on time now. The deadline is a week after the conference. I feel like it's like
November 14th. It's the week of Thanksgiving. It's on the website.
yeah. You have
Oh,
some.
you're Canadian, yeah.
You're
I want to say it's the 14th, but it's on the website. It's somewhere around there. Yeah, we should know that. I agree with you, Grace.
You have an excuse.
November 19th is what the form says.
Thank you. Okay, November 19th. Do it by November 19th. Plenty of time, and if you send an email to PROFDEV, ProfDev, like professional development, ProfDev, at mcn.edu, we'll get it.
And one thing that will go up on the webpage, it's not up now, is just a set of FAQs about the program. So if you haven't gotten, which hopefully captures a lot of what we talked about today, but at any point if you have questions, shoot us an email.
Oh, look, they're clapping already.